a person can make a difference in a child's life who has been experiencing or has experienced trauma. And that's you. So we're going to turn you over to the Mifflin Park Elementary trauma team. We have Fio? Yes. Fio. And you can read all their qualifications on the back. I don't have any fun history or facts about them. Sue Hepner and Kathy Jacobs, who's just taken over as the interim principal at Mifflin Park. So I'm going to turn this over to them. When they're finished, I need you to hang with me for 15 minutes to do some tutor updates and to do mandated reporter training. So do not leave at the end when they're finished, okay? You need to listen to me for 15 minutes. All right, ladies, thank you.
So I'm Rini, and I might walk away from the mic a little bit or walk around. So really what I want to know first is, do you have any specific questions? Like, is there something that you want to make sure that we cover in the next 45 minutes or 40 minutes? So you get out here on time. Anybody have any specific questions about trauma or children in trauma? Okay. Well, I do. Sorry. I got a hand.
The procedure if the child, discloses. We'll cover that at the end. That's part of the last 15 minutes. We'll do mandated reporter training.
Okay. Secondly, go ahead.
Touch. Talk about limits about you touching.
Okay.
The effect that has on kids.
Okay. All right. We will approach that. Anybody else?
Repeat that into the microphone.
Oh, certainly. The question was to talk about touching or like physical contact with children who we suspect have had trauma. And we will kind of cover that when we go into, where the brain is functioning. Okay? All right. So I want to thank you for your dedication and for helping children. Certainly we couldn't do what we do without volunteers helping with one of the most important curriculum-based assessments, which is reading. So let's just talk a little bit about trauma and why we're talking about it. So some of this information is a little bit older, some not so old. So in 2017, there were nearly 13 allegations of suspected abuse in this county, in Berks County. A Leesport mother was held in court for severe case of neglect of her infant daughter. West Reading mom was accused of leaving her 4-year-old daughter at home at night with her boyfriend and did not come home. At times I work with undocumented families, which makes getting the right resources even harder. So they're afraid from the moment I knock on the door. And this is from a woman who works with children and youth, that some of the most sensitive cases for me are for the most limited. And you know that in school we have that problem too. So some of the kids that need the most are from the parents who had the least. And so we have to take them through the entire system in order to get them help. And sometimes that takes a while. And then, in the interim, the children are in the situations that they are. And then 37% of American children are reported to Child Protective Services by their 18th birthday. African Americans jump up to 54%. Okay. So let's just talk about the brain and why trauma is such an important factor in education or, generally in our lives. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ACEs study. The ACEs study was conducted about 20 years ago in Southern California. The purpose of the ACE study was to figure out what elements of trauma most affect children. So it was a two-year study that was, like I said, conducted. Over 17,000 health maintenance organizations interviewed children in terms of what was occurring in their lives. Okay, go ahead. So one of the top 10 areas that they discovered was psychological abuse. Physical abuse was reported at 28%. Sexual abuse at 21%. Emotional neglect. Now, these don't operate on their own, right? So, if you're sexually abused, then there's probably some emotional neglect going on. So all these are kind of intertwined within each other. So don't look at them as a separate entity, but more something that kind of corresponds. So physical neglect, emotional neglect, sexual abuse, loss of a parent for any reason, mother treated violently, and then the children are witness to that violent treatment. So whether they're actually being physically abused themselves, that just witnessing that is enough. Substance abuse, and we all know and we have read about the opioid crisis in Berks County. So it is a significant issue, and we're seeing it more and more in the children that are coming into kindergarten and first graders. So these are the children that are really, kind of born to that opioid crisis. Mental illness, and then criminal behavior in the household. So children who have perhaps one or both parents incarcerated. We see more and more children who are living in a foster care program or under the guidance of an extended family and not their own. Okay. So what does this mean? So what's the probability for outcome? Well, if you look at the numbers, so with no ACEs in your life, so no trauma in your life, nothing has happened to you in your life, you've lived a pretty sustainable and happy life, still 1 in 16 of us will smoke, 1 in 69 of us will become alcoholics, 1 in 480 of us will experience with drug, 1 in 14 of us will have heart disease, and 1 in 96 of us will attempt suicide. One ACE, so just one. 1 to 3, but think about it, there's just one of those factors in a child's life. 1 in 9 of those children or growing adults will smoke. 1 in 9 will become alcoholics. 1 in 43 will eventually turn to drug use. 1 in 7 will have a heart disease, and 1 in 10 will attempt suicide. 4 to 8 of those ACEs, remember, or 4 to 8 of those factors, remember I said that they don't operate singly, right? So they're intertwined with each other. 1 in 6 will smoke, 1 in 6 will become alcoholics, 1 in 30 will experiment with drugs, 1 in 6 will have heart disease, and 1 in 5 will attempt suicide. So it's pretty significant, the children that are sitting in front of you. Now, obviously, you don't have, a rap sheet of these children, right? And we do. And certainly if you have questions, understanding that we can only share so much, but we can certainly help. If you're sitting in this elementary school dealing with a child, we can certainly help you understand where that child might be coming from, at least in the moment, all right? So let's talk about the impact of the brain. A child who experiences trauma, and that just kind of goes along. I don't know that I necessarily need to read that to you. Obviously, they are more likely to experiment with drugs or alcohol or have some kind of issue in their lives, including a mental health issue that is going to become a barrier to their learning. Go ahead. So where does the brain function? Well, for most kids, we function we're at a survival stage. So we know we have grandchildren, right? All of us have grandchildren or children of our own. So we know that the first thing a child needs is just to be cared for. So the 3 basic needs, right? And once we take care of the 3 basic needs, then the child begins to self-regulate. So the child begins to kind of, on their own, understand the rules of society, so to speak. And yeah, you might have to kind of, remind them of it every once in a while, but they begin to understand. And then their social-emotional development comes along because of their peer relationships and because of the support that they have with their family. And and I apologize, I forgot her first name, but she said when she introduced us, was one of the primary things is just to make a connection with a child. That is, honestly, the biggest thing that we can do for children, whether at that moment they read that book or not is probably less important than just knowing that somebody cares about them. And then the last thing is cognition. But for children who are in trauma, they really exist in that bottom stage. They're really just trying to survive. Right? And we'll talk about in the brain what that means. Right? And then the rest of it comes after. Right, so their survival is the number one thing that they're mostly worried about. They're not worried about reading that book today or what's going to happen with tomorrow's homework. They're worried about maybe having dinner that night. Right? Go ahead. So what develops first? So for all of us, the brainstem, now you know that the brain is developing, but the general development of the brain starts with the brain stem. All right, so it regulates our basic needs. It's located at the very base of your brain. And it develops almost exclusively in utero. So now, but you have to think about those parents that are kind of abusing drugs throughout the pregnancy or abusing alcohol throughout the pregnancy. Right, go ahead. All right, then the next thing to develop is the brain, is the midbrain. So the midbrain is in the early years of development. This is where they develop their fine motor and large motor skills, where they develop balance. And then it becomes responsible for the reflexive actions, such as sleep, and directing their impulses. So I know that you probably work with a lot of kids who have some impulse control issues, and we'll talk about where that's coming from. So the next thing that develops, is the limbic system, and the limbic system isn't developing. So adolescents, and when adolescents become somewhere around 14, 15, up until the time they're almost 24, their brains are pruning. Everything's changing in their brains. All right, so that kind of describes why teenagers are the way they are. So it develops all through their adolescence. It controls their emotional, their reactivity, kind of their thought process, whether this is a good idea or not a good idea, right? And then it's represented visually by their emotions and how they relate to other people. And then the very last thing that develops all the way through adulthood, and some of us are still developing this probably, is our ability to think and to judge. Right? So we're responsible for abstract thinking based on concrete information, our verbal and nonverbal communication, be able to pick up what somebody else is throwing at you, and then also your problem-solving skills, your self-image, your ability to modulate yourself. All right? So let's talk about in the brain what happens to children in trauma. Okay. So if we would take the heart rate of everyone here in this room, one, we would hope we have a heart rate, and two, we would assume that most of us are probably functioning somewhere around the 90 to 100. So we're calm, we're alert, we're attentive. If you would take the heart rate of children that are, or the impulse of some of children that are in the trauma stage, they're probably operating in that 136 or 111 to 135. So you have to think about the last time you were afraid of something, and now you're in a classroom, and your pulse is operating at that rate, so operating very quickly. Okay, go ahead. So what do you think about when in the moment of terror? Well, so if a bear is chasing you, you're thinking, I got to get out of here, right? So that's exactly what's happening with these kids. They don't think in tomorrow, they think in now, the here and now. Right now you yelled at me. Right now I'm not feeling good about myself, so right now I'm going to react to you yelling at me. Had nothing to do with what happened before. It had nothing to do with what's going to come. So if they're in that stage, if your pulse is operating at that height, then you're thinking, I don't care about time. So if you're thinking kind of in that mid stage, you're thinking, okay, I might be thinking about what's going to happen maybe during math class, but I'm still not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. And then in the stage of alarm, so you're a little bit calmer, you're a little bit more in the sense of reasoning. Remember, that's where your limbic is. So I'm thinking, okay, I've got today, I've got tomorrow, I know what's going to happen in terms of, at least the near future. And then if you're in that cognitive stage, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do. Right? So what happens to kids when we're teaching them, or when you're teaching them? So if they're operating in that bottom stage, they're going to be reflexive. So think about when you go to a doctor, when you get your knee, right, and your reflex, you're just going to move. This is where they're at. So they're going to just react to something, and you may not know. It might have meant something. So if you have them, like our Ready.Set.READ comes at Wednesday afternoon. So it might have happened something that happened like at 8 o'clock that morning, all right, or something that happened on the bus before they came into school. But they're still operating at that stage. So they are just going to react. Right? And you're not really going to understand what you did, or because you probably didn't do anything, that they're still at that kind of survival stage. Right? So the fear is, I'm going to react perhaps what you said, and it still may not make any sense to you. Their emotional is from their limbic, so if they start to cry, and let's face it, you're teaching kids who are really struggling with reading. Right? So you're getting them and you're saying, here, let's sit down and read. So even without trauma in their lives, they're really operating off of something that this is not something that I feel comfortable with or good about. Right? And then obviously as you move up on Bloom's taxonomy of reasoning, you're operating at the concrete or creative stage. So once that cognition comes in, we are able to reason with them. It may take a while, though, to get them to that stage. All right, so we talked a little bit about this. I don't know that I have to go over word for word, but so the fast heart rate, they're living in the moment. If they're in that second stage, reality lives right there. If they're in that third stage, we're moving more towards the norm, so that's a good thing. One should just kind of say comforting words. That might be all that a child needs. And then obviously, if they're in that healthy stage, then you've got a kid that is in front of you that's really ready to do what you're asking them to do. All right, more on a brain break.
It's very important, even when you first get with your child, that you have them do some breathing. So the first one we're going to do is It's called square breathing. And your thing is called box breathing. It essentially means the same thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in for a count of 4. You're going to hold your breath for a count of 4. You will breathe out for a count of 4. And then you will just rest, not breathe in or out, for a count of 4. Now we're all going to do this, and I'm going to be honest with you. It's been quite a day. So you might have seen me come in, and then I disappeared. I'll be honest, I was behind this chair doing square breathing. And it helped me. I calmed down. I was able to come in here and be okay then. So, just like what I do with the kids, because I'm the school counselor at Mifflin Park, so I do teach guidance lessons. So what I do with the kids, I'm going to do with you, all right? You're going to see me counting off for you. Okay, you can also tap your foot. I'm also going to be tapping my foot because this is just what I do. So we're going to do this 3 rounds. And I want you to kind of realize, but the before and after, how are you feeling? See if you feel a little more calm. All right, and again, I think this helps after the kids have gotten through with their day, they've packed up their book bags, they rush to see you, their bodies are kind of like this, and it will help them to calm down. So then I think it's off to Kathy Jacobs.
The term right now, the key word right now is people are saying kids are dysregulated. And dysregulation means they are stressed out, for a better choice of words. So for the dysregulated students, we do things such as brain breaks. And with you guys coming in at the end of the day, they're rushing around like Mrs. Hepner said. They're stressed out because maybe they didn't bring their homework's still in their classroom, or they're worried about their little brother or sister getting home and nobody's home. So we have to look at ways to calm them down. So when we do the brain break, what we're hoping to do is regulate their bodies, regulate their minds, regulate their emotions, regulate the breathing. So that's where we're looking at. I might have lost it. So things that are going to be calming strategies are things that we're looking at doing. So we want to make sure that we regulate and get them back into a mode where they can work with you and not work against you. Same thing with the 3 R's that we talked about during trauma-informed therapy sessions are regulate, relate, and reason. So those are the 3 things we want to be able to do. If they're not regulated, if they're dysregulated, they aren't going to get to that stage of relating to you and being able to work with you to learn how to read. So that's where we're looking to get down to the reasoning part. So right here is just a little comic that we have. Your regulation means your ability to put time and thought between your feeling and your reaction. A lot of students who are dysregulated are going to react inappropriately. So if they're very stressed out, it's going to look like someone who can't sit still, or they may be dysregulated and want to walk back and forth and pace. So what we were trying to do is, how do we react to that? So as you see, this little guy is trying to figure out, do I push the button? Don't I push the button? Do I push the button? And we see that sometimes with our students that we're working with. They may want to learn, but they can't calm down to learn. So they're in that state of, do I push the button? Don't I push the button? So rules of regulation, your role in the classroom. Dysregulated students, like I said, are going to have a hard time concentrating. They're not in that right frame of mind to concentrate. So we need to greatly look at how to get them calmed down. In addition to the academic problems, you're going to see those classroom behaviors, and that's a lot of what you guys see sometimes. You might come, like I said, at the end of the day, you're trying to work with them, and they might have had an issue at home or in school, and you're getting the outlet. So how can we get over that? The regulation and the behavior. Behaviors of dysregulated students, they tend to be out of control. Even we look at students sometimes and we see them pacing, so that is our cue that they need a break. That break can be anything from walking to the water fountain and getting a drink, or maybe allowing them to stand up and do their work or read to you while they're standing, Or if you see that they really seem to be struggling, you can say, do you need to take a walk down the hallway? You and I can take a walk. So definitely look for ways to re-regulate. Big thing is, don't take things personally. I know the one question was about touching students. There's a lot of times that some of our dysregulated students will react if you touch them. If you see a kid that flinches, that's a child that you're going to ask. You're going to say, is it okay for me to touch you? Or is it okay for me to give you a high five? A lot of times if you ask them prior to, and I'm a toucher, I'm not going to lie. I'm somebody who does like to hug. I like to give high fives. When our students get off the bus in the morning, I'm always trying to, kids will come up and hug me. Those kids are okay to hug, but if I would go up to one of my children who I know has an issue with dysregulation, that could set them off for the day. So a lot of times, I would suggest when you're first trying to connect with a student or you're first trying to build that relationship with a child that you're working with, I would ask them, is it okay for me to give you a high five? Would you prefer to do a handshake? Once you get to know them, they're going to feel more comfortable with you, and they may come up to you and want to do the hug. They may want to come up to you and say to you, can I get a high five for reading so well? So it's just, again, a matter of knowing the student you're working with and building that connection with them, because again, once you know that, then you'll be able to decide how far you can go. Like I said, I'm one that does hug, but I usually wait for that student to come up to me before I go that route. When they get off the school bus or they're getting on the school bus and I see what kind of day they had, I'm like, hey, give me a high five. Hey, you want a hug? Let's do a fist bump. So think of things like that you can do instead of maybe a physical hug.
Yeah. I just want to add to that too. I think sometimes when you're working with children, and perhaps not realizing where they're coming from. Remember that if they're functioning in those two lower parts of the brain, that they haven't established that trust. So touching them or developing that relationship with an adult or someone who's caring is not something that they're comfortable with because it hasn't proven to be effective for them, or at least that they haven't kind of been able to establish those relationships, so they tend to push back. So another reason why you'd want to ask before is to make sure that they do trust you, that they understand that you're really there for them, and not necessarily, against them, so to speak. All right.
We have the calming brain breaks for children. And before I do this next one, I do want to say, you get to the child, you're working with the child, and you're like, what was that box breathing thing? I can't remember. Then just breathe. It's okay. Just be sure, though, that they're taking long, fairly deep breaths. And there is the difference between that chest breathing, which sounds more like wheezing, and belly breathing. I teach the children to put their hands on their belly and try to have their belly raise, okay, or come out. So again, I cannot talk enough about the breath. I have learned about the breath, and it can kind of trick a person's body if they are in that fight or flight mode. It actually tricks their brain into thinking that they're okay. So there's not enough that we can talk about the breath. All right, but moving on. This next one, it's kind of fun. I can actually do it, so I'm kind of proud of myself for being able to do this one. All right, so this is what it looks like. You put your left finger on your right ear. You know what? Let me back up. Let me back this truck up. Why are we doing this? All right, so I'm kind of jumping ahead to my interventions, but when children are dysregulated, when children have had trauma, when their brain has not developed properly, anything that you can help them cross their midline helps them. It actually builds their brain. It helps their brain. So let's fast forward again. Left finger on your right ear, okay? I'm just gonna yell. Your right finger on your nose. I know, this is silly. Pretend we're kids, all right? So, what you're supposed to do is take your right finger and you'll put it on your left ear. Your left finger you'll put on your nose, but you can't just go like this. That's cheating. You have to switch your arms or your hands where they're located. So it looks like this. And then go again. I find if I do it fast, it works better. Okay? But we're crossing our midline. Another one that you're going to find in the back of the packet, I cannot do it. So it might be kind of cool if you see if some of your kids, see if the kids can do it. This is the next one. Okay, so you have your thumb, either thumb, it doesn't matter. Your thumb is up, your pinky is out. Okay? Then you have to switch. And I can't do it. So, to switch it, this pinky will come out, this thumb will come up. Okay? It never works. See? That, I know, right? And then, I can't tuck it. So that one, I'm not as proud. I can't do it. All right? All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. We're going to talk about interventions for just a few minutes. And to also back up, the three of us were at a most wonderful workshop at the BCIU. It was in the spring. And this is where we learned a lot more about trauma, what trauma can do. And I was kind of hopeless. I was thinking, great, we've learned about trauma. We know, kids are traumatized. Now what? The most exciting thing happened, though, at this workshop. They said with enough intervention, these children's brains that are pretty much stuck at that brain stem, okay, or the limbic, midbrain. The brain stem and the midbrain, they're kind of stuck there. With enough intervention, we can help children, we can help their brains to develop like they should. And they're doing this at the place that did come for this conference. They're actually doing this with children at their location. So that gave me hope. It did. And if you don't provide any other intervention, trust that you're just providing yourself. And that's enough. These children don't have, some of them, a person that they feel cares about them. You provide that, okay? So let's go. Interventions. The earlier, the better. Of course, if we can get to a child that is 3 years old, 4 years old, great. We only get them when they're 5, so we can start when they are in kindergarten, okay? So no part of the brain will change in an organized way unless it is activated. And we have a booklet full of different interventions that we can do with these children. Okay? So many of the primary areas of deficit are in the brainstem, midbrain, and the limbic areas, which Rini had talked about, that for these children that are so traumatized, it's their brainstem, their midbrain, that's where they're stuck. Okay? So repetitive, specific, and sequential experience can recapture potential. So that was the part where I was like, there's hope. I was happy. Okay. Now, for us, we have not really put this in place yet because it is a lot. We are trying to develop something that would help us be able to provide these interventions for our children that are the most traumatized. So, for healing and prevention of dysregulation, we would need to have these children do it. We see 3 to 5 minutes every 20 to 30 minutes at school. So they would be breaking between 2 and 3 times an hour to do these things. So it would kind of interrupt class. We're trying to work this through, okay? And after dysregulation occurs, which means if they've had a bad day, they're in that fight or flight mode of thinking. If they cannot come back, we don't go, too bad, you're coming into class. You're going to listen, We can't make them listen. We can't make their brains access that information if they are in that fight or flight. So that's what that means. That as long as it takes for them to become regulated again is what we give them. Okay. We don't have, of course, fidgets for all of you, but at this conference, these people, they provided baskets of fidgets for us, and we found them to be very useful. I know it helped me kind of calm myself down and regulate. And a lot of times, fidgets are looked upon as toys. We're preferring to look as fidgets. If the child gets a fidget that works for them, then let them use it. Okay?
What are examples?
Squish balls, twisty things. I honestly played with the one that looked like a baby toy. It had spinny things on it. What else? Like, especially the squeeze balls, like I said, the twisty things. Oh gosh, there's all sorts of things that spin. But again, you don't want it to become, like if they're not using it properly, then it's not the fidget for them. We've even had, for some students, Velcro underneath their desk. If they need to touch something, they can touch that Velcro underneath their desk.
The spinners that came out, I don't know if you have grandchildren, remember the spinners that they were playing with? Well, schools had to stop them from using them. But in actuality, the research showed that it did help children with ADHD. It's just then every child had ADHD, so they all started to bring them in. And then that became an issue for them.
I mean, there are other things that if a parent wants to provide it, that they could use. There's a little cube that has all different little buttons on it that you can push, and like a clicker that you can push on it. But primarily, it would be those softer squish balls that people would use. You know what? I already used up my brain break, so. I can talk about it, though. That's fine. Again, brain breaks, and we use them even for children that aren't traumatized. I think we all need brain breaks. Okay, we all need to get up, move around at times, especially children. Okay, so they are important. Typically 3 to 5 minutes, but it could be longer. And again, the belly breathing versus the chest breathing. I already kind of stole my own thunder at the end, but I did want to explain the difference. And what is very important is to do that belly breathing and not the chest breathing. It really doesn't help you. It doesn't connect the breath to the parts of the body that it needs to. Okay? Anything else?
No. So do you have any questions about anything that was presented? And we answered the question about the mic. Oh, sorry. Do you have any questions about what was presented? No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
I'll let them finish their part.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. That was, I hope, very helpful. Again, I didn't communicate numbers correctly with our wonderful speakers, and so I will get the PowerPoint to you so that you have all of those brain break things that you can do. I know that some of this stuff is hard for some of our tutors, because sometimes I hear from tutors about, well, I don't understand why they just can't sit and listen, and I don't understand why they can't read this, and I don't understand this. Because you have to think about, I'm 62, and I know how much things have changed in my lifetime, but I've spent 40 years in education, and kids today are different than even kids when my daughter was born in 1985. And so we have to look, these kids are experiencing a lot more things around them in the world that affect them in different ways, and that's why this stuff is important. I have a grandson who has some attention difficulties, and these brain break things work with him. So it's important to think about that these are the kids today and what they're dealing with, and that's why we need to know these things. So one of the questions was what to do if a child reports something trauma-related to you. You have a small paper, I forgot to keep one for myself, folded over paper, 4 sides, that's information about mandated reporting. And we talk about this every year. You have clearances through the state of Pennsylvania, and therefore you are a mandated reporter. So if a child, and I'm just going to give you the basic of this, you have the paper to read, and I can stay and answer any questions that you have. And your school coordinator should be able to answer questions too. But the laws have changed, and so if a child discloses something to you, and all the definitions of abuse are in that pamphlet that I gave you, if a child discloses that they're being harmed in any way, physically, sexually, mentally and emotionally is a little bit harder to do, but whatever they tell you, it's not it's not for you to decide whether it's abuse or not. If it doesn't sound right to you, you do not leave the school until you talk to your school coordinator or the principal or the guidance counselor or somebody in administration. You stand in the office and you stand your ground until somebody helps you, because you need to call Childline. But you are not going to have the information they're going to need, a child's address or their parent name. You might not even know your child's last name. So the school personnel should sit down with you and make the call to Childline. They will get you on the phone when it's your turn to talk to the person who's taking the intake information on the other side, and you just tell what you heard, what the child said to you, or if you saw a bruise or a cut or a mark. I mean, the kids are in school, so 9 times out of 10, if there's anything going on, the school staff is already on top of it. And the other thing is that the school staff may know that this child's already involved, but you are still responsible. So in the event, our school partners are wonderful, but I have to put this out here in case it would happen. If it would happen that they tell you, oh, we're on this, or we know this is going on, or don't worry about it, you still have to make a report. So the Childline number is in there. I'll get your questions at the end here. A Childline number is in there. You must call. And my cell phone number is on the back of that paper, so that if you want to call me and talk to me and have me walk you through the process before you dial Childline, I will do that. Please, if you have to call me, and we've only had a handful of people in 8 years who have ever had to make a report, so most of you are never going to have to worry about this. But please, I get a lot of spam calls, so leave your name and telephone number saying, I am at Cindy, this is a tutor, so-and-so, I need to make a Childline report, please call me back at this number, and I will call you back, okay? All right, I had a question, lady in the pink here.
I was just wondering, can you answer that? There's a Childline number on the back.
Yes, Childline number in the back. It is also in your packets. Everybody should have a packet. I know we ended up with some people at tables that weren't tutors, so hopefully you didn't take your packet. If you didn't get a tutor packet, you should have the folder in front of you, the Ready.Set.READ folder. Inside is information for you. Yes, that's your packet this year. The program guide is in there, and there's the who to contact page is in there, and the Childline number is on that page as well, along with my contact number and other things that you need. Please review the program guide. Hopefully it'll be easier for you. We removed about 15 pages, so it should be easier to work with now, because we figure you all know the history by now and you don't need all that stuff. Before I move on, any questions about mandated reporting? Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, the Childline, is that connected to the state or the county?
The Childline is state, and so you have to, as a mandated reporter, you have to call the state Childline. And the other thing, the question I get, you will never know what the outcome is. That's the law, because that would be an invasion of privacy for the child and their family. It's your duty to make the report, and that's you're going to make the report, and you're never going to hear anything again. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I know you'd all like to know there's a positive outcome and everything's okay, but that's not the way it works. Any other questions about mandated reporting? Yes, ma'am.
When we call you or the state line, will we have to know or write down the first and last name of the person at the school and report that they said, yes, this is being handled?
No, you just call and report what you saw. You don't have to give them any information about what you spoke to with anybody in the school. You just report what you heard from the child or what you witnessed. That's it. Yes, that is in your, thank you, that's in your packet in the little folder that I gave you. It says what not to do. and it says what not to say, and there's like 10 things. You don't ask any questions, you don't put any thoughts in their mind, you don't add to it, and there's a list of things that you can say in there. So you could say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that happened to you, thank you for telling me it was the right thing to do, and that's it. But you don't interview them, don't ask questions, don't give them any suggestions, nothing. You just, I know it's hard, try not to act shocked. That's probably the hardest thing. But you don't ask them questions in any way. You just hear what they said, and then that's the information that you report. And I'll be here afterwards if you want to talk more with me about it, because we're almost out of time, and we have to look at this sheet, tutor reminders. So just a few things. I already said about the new program guide. Please make sure you read it thoroughly. If you have updated clearance, I know Darby had contacted you, a lot of you this summer, saying it was time to renew your clearances. You take copies of your clearances to the school and present them to your school coordinator. Do not give away your originals. You may need them again. And if you have not tutored for a while and you're just back to tutoring this year and you applied for a new clearance, and you had one that was issued in 2017, that's still good. So the state's going to send you your 2017 clearance. And we've been trying to get all the schools up to speed on this as well, so that they know that the state is no longer issuing new clearances when you ask for one, unless if you already have one on file that's under 5 years old. There is a change from when a lot of you got your clearances the last time. If you had to get FBI fingerprints, if you have lived in the state of Pennsylvania for more than 10 years, your school should be giving you a waiver form to sign, so you no longer have to go get the fingerprints done. You just sign a waiver that says that, I forget what it says on it, but you say that you didn't have any criminal activity on your record or whatever. And the schools have those as well, because they're all different. Every school has a different form. So that would be in lieu of FBI clearances. Food. Food allergies are worse than ever. I actually have a grandson with a red dye allergy. And red dye is in everything. I have a wheat allergy. Wheat is in everything. I mean, you would not believe the stuff that it's in. So we ask that you don't take any food of any kind into the school. We know that sometimes if you're an after-school tutor, your kids are begging you for food and saying they're hungry. If you're not able to distract them and you have a child that repeatedly asks for food, please talk to your school coordinator about how to handle that situation and what can be done. Because we cannot take the chance of bringing even a food that is manufactured in a facility that has peanuts on its machine could kill a child with a peanut allergy. So, no food. Gifts, again, we ask that you don't give any gifts to your children other than if you want to give little stickers or little pencils or erasers or something from the Dollar Tree, that's fine. We will again give you a book at the winter break to give to your child as a gift before the break, and then we'll give you the bags like you got tonight on the table, the green bags with books in for you to give them at the end of tutoring. School guidelines. We had some issues last year. Some of the school coordinators, when I met with them at the end of the year, please follow whatever the school guidelines are, and they're all different. That's why you have a coordinator that gives you an orientation. Whatever their dress code is for you, or their policy about what materials they want you to use or what books they want you to read, please adhere by that. We are guests in the school. And if we don't adhere by their policies, there may come a time where they decide they don't want us to be a guest in their school anymore. So because we want tutoring to be a positive asset to support to them and not a burden for them, because they have enough going on already. So please, and I know most of you do, I know who all's in this room, so there were just some isolated incidents. And make sure if you are taking a child during instructional time, if you're during the day tutor, that you get them back to their classroom on time, because the teacher schedules are very tight and there's a lot they have to cover. So just whatever their policies and rules are, please follow them. If something doesn't sit well with you, please call me and discuss it, and we'll see how we can work that out, okay? Any questions about that? No, okay. I'm getting you at the end, you're tired and you want to go home. Tutoring forms, this is another thing. In your packets, you have a stack of those tutor bookmarks, the tutor family bookmarks. That is part of the program that you complete one of those at the end of every session and give it to your student. I know I've had people say to me, well, they're in the student's folder when I get back. It's still your job to complete the bookmark, and even if it comes back in the folder the next week, then you take them and you hand them to the coordinator and say, you know, Johnny hasn't been giving these to his parents. Can you please see that they get to the parent? And then you do that. But that's part of your job as a tutor, to fill out that tutor family bookmark. That's the only communication the families get about tutoring. If the school is using the tutor communication sheet, there's a copy of one in your program guide, or they may have some different form that they're using. The teachers rely on you filling that out to know what kind of progress you made and to know what to assign the next time. So please make sure that whatever forms the school asks you to use, that you use them every tutoring session. I mean, sometimes there might be something where there's a fire drill or something and you can't use it, but for the most part, as much as you can, please make sure that you fill out all those forms. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
Just sometimes I always got the one that child took home with them, this one. I always got that one done, but it was hard getting the one that sent to the teacher, that one.
So you're saying you always got the tutor family bookmark, but it was hard to have time to get the other one?
To get the one that you sent to the teacher.
Okay, so if you find that you're running out of time to get the one that you send to the teacher, then I would suggest that you leave a couple minutes at the end of your tutoring session, because it should be an hour, that either child could look at a book or review some words or something while you fill that out, because it's a very important part of the program.
Would it be okay if we filled it out at home that night and took it back either the next day or the next day?
It's preferable that it's left there when you leave for your tutoring, at the end of your tutoring session. Okay. All right, confidentiality. You're probably sick of me telling this story because you've all heard it, but there was a lady who was talking to her friend in the line at the deli counter about the student she was tutoring and all the problems that the student was having, and how she just, what a cranky little girl she was and how awful it was. And then the lady behind her tapped her on the back and happened to introduce herself as the mother of the child. So you want to make sure you maintain confidentiality, because we actually almost lost the privilege of tutoring in an elementary school because a tutor went to a parent and told them that they thought their child needed an evaluation for special education. So if you have an opinion, if you have a concern, and I know some of you are trained educators or other professionals that might know that, please discuss it with the coordinator, not with the parent of the child. Any concern that you have, that's who the coordinator is for. And if you have a concern that you feel isn't being addressed and you've discussed it with the coordinator, then you call me and then we'll work something out with the school. But it's very, those are the things where tutors become more of a hindrance than a help. And you guys are so helpful. You're great tutors. The kids love you. And so we want to keep you in the schools and working with the kids. We don't want anything to interfere with that. I just talked about concerns about students. And as I said, Dr. Lely's slide that said that adult who is a positive influence on a child's life can make all the difference for a child who's affected by trauma. That's all of you. That's all of you. You guys are marvelous. You give your time. You give your energy. I know you just give your heart to these children and that you are there for them. I thank you. You may be the only adult in their lives that gives them a one-on-one positive word and encouragement. And we repeatedly have coordinators tell us that at least one or two children in the program, they all see improvement, but at least one or two of the children improved because they saw a change in the child's attitude towards reading, because you had been that child's cheerleader and told them they could do it. You had been that child's cheerleader. You told them, you can work out that word. We'll get that word together. You told them, don't worry if you stumbled on that word. Just try it again. Let me say it for you and you can say it after me. You were that person who made a difference in their lives, and they were able to get benchmark reading because you helped build their confidence to become the confident reader that they needed to be to learn new things. Yeah. One last thing before we go. Over at the table where the lovely ladies from Mifflin Park are standing. Yes, look, Vanna, see, I need Vanna there. We have some things that are left from other tutor trainings. So we've got lots of the wipe-off pockets that you can put the games in, some of the games that are in the tutor game box at your schools that you can do with the wipe-off markers and wipe off. There's plenty of those. Take those. There's dice if you need a new dice for any of the dice games, and we actually provided a paper of one of the vocabulary rolling dice games. There's some of you had attended a workshop that used little pawn pieces. There's extras of those if you need them. And if those of you that were at the workshop with the Kaboom game, there's extra tongue depressors if you need them. And there's a box with, yeah, I know that sounds kind of crazy. You write words on them. You don't do anything else with them. And then there's rubber ducks that could be a great fidget toy. You can use them in reading when you're taking turns reading. You can use that as your handoff when it's my turn to read and it's your turn to read and give back. That's what the rubber ducks are for, or as a fidget that we know now is that. So help yourself to the materials right there. There's little baggies if you need to put stuff in. I will be here for questions. The Mifflin Park team will be here for a couple minutes for questions. I thank you and have a wonderful year tutoring.